Hello everyone! In this video we'll be discussing the Pillore Book of Sei Shonagon. A lot of this information will be grounded in the same historical context as the Tale of Genji was, and so if you need a refresher on the historical context, please go back to Monday's lecture to refresh your memory. Now this will be a short lecture because the readings that we are doing in the Pillore Book are not long, but I do want to briefly cover Sei as an author and then also discuss just a couple brief passages from her Pillore Book so that you will have an easier time doing this week's discussion board. So let's get started. Today you'll probably want some kind of note-taking materials as well as your copy of the readings from the Pillore Book found on Canvas in the Tale of Genji module. So the Pillore Book that we are reading is the Pillore Book of Sei Shonagon. Now, Sei lived also during the Heian period of Japanese history. She lived at the same time as Murasaki Shikabu. In fact, they knew each other. If you recall from Monday's lecture, they were potentially set up to be rivals. So Sei lived from approximately 966 to either 1017 or 1025. Again, just like with Lady Murasaki, we're not 100% sure what year she died. Also like Murasaki, Sei was a writer, a poet, and a lady-in-waiting at the imperial court. Sei served the Empress Teishi, who you should recall from Monday's lecture, and Sei is most famous for her surviving Pillore Book. Sei Shonagon's given name might be Kiyohara no Nagiko, but honestly, we don't know. There are a couple of sources that indicate that this may be the same woman, judging by family relationships, timelines, etc., but there's no proof that this is her. Now, if you recall from the Tale of Genji, it was considered rude to use someone's given name. Rather, they would use titles, they would use nicknames, things like that. And so we have some difficulty telling if this is the same woman. Now, Sei started serving Empress Teishi at age 27, at which time she was either freshly divorced from her first husband or about to divorce him. So she was single while she was living in the imperial court. After she ended her service with Empress Teishi in the year 1000, she either remarried and gave birth to a daughter or became a nun who took a vow of poverty. Again, just like we're not sure what her given name is, we're not sure what happened to her after her imperial service because of things like people not using names in historical records and just the paucity of historical records in the first place. Because of this, few records of Sei exist after the year 1000 at all. So the Pillore Book itself, Sei's Pillore Book, is part essays, part poems, part diary entries, and part anecdotes, all about Sei Shonagon's experiences living at the imperial court. And this book is really fascinating as a kind of personal miscellany. It's really lovely. The poetry is beautiful. The writing style is gorgeous, but it's also a really useful historical document because it is one of the records that really has survived very well from the period. It shows a very intimate view of Heian court life. In the same way that we can kind of use Genji to tell us things about the historical time period, we still have to take it with a grain of salt because it was written as a fictional piece. Meanwhile, the Pillore Book of Sei Shonagon was written as nonfiction because she wrote essays about her real experiences, diary entries about her real lived experiences. We can use it as a historical document as well as a lovely piece of literature. It's important to note that a Pillore Book is actually a genre of text, and when I first mentioned that it's a genre that's made up of essays, poems, anecdotes, other kinds of literature, it's easy to think that the Pillore Book is really similar to a medieval European miscellany or florilegium. And the key difference between a Pillore Book and, say, florilegia is that florilegia arose out of people wanting to have a variety of texts, but but not having the space or the money or the resources to afford to have, say, 20 separate books. And so what they would do is they would essentially take excerpts. They would take their favorite parts of each book or useful passages from each book, or like a couple of favorite poems, and then have those excerpts copied into a single text. Meanwhile, a pillow book is actually a collection, an intentional collection of idle notes or notebooks. So idle here refers to the idea that they're casual writings. So where a florilegium is intentionally excerpted pieces of longer works, a pillow book is an intentional collection of casual writings. Like, here's this short piece I wrote, here's this poem I wrote, here's this diary entry I wrote on a cafe napkin, and I've just collected them all into one book rather than taking snippets of other existing books. But it is similar in the sense that it does contain a lot of short pieces from different genres in one text. There's just more cohesion in a pillow book, ironically, because they are casual writings rather than intentional constructions. And I know that's a little confusing, but you'll see when you read the text kind of what I mean. So one of the things that you will notice about today's reading in the Pillow Book is that it contains a ton of lists of things that are loosely related. Now, these lists are not to-do lists, and they're not even just like lists of things or words or whatever. They read more like prose poems, which is a poem written, not in verse, but in prose, in just regular old sentences. And they're very highly dependent on imagery and sensory details. They are meant to draw out certain emotions or vibes. And so in these lists, Sei is not concerned with drawing close logical or conceptual ties. She's not even really worried about completely accurately categorizing things. She's more concerned with, like I said, these specific sensory details, this overall vibe, in order to create a specific emotional response. So let's briefly look at a couple of these examples. This is one excerpt from our reading called Adorable Things, and it says, quote, "The face of a child drawn on a melon. A baby of 2 or so is crawling rapidly along the ground. With his sharp eyes, he catches sight of a tiny object and, picking it up with his pretty little fingers, takes it to show to a grown-up person. A baby sparrow that comes hopping up when one imitates the squeak of a mouse, or again, when one has tied it with a thread round its leg and its parents bring insects or worms and pop them in its mouth. Delightful! One picks up a pretty baby and holds him for a while in one's arms. While one is fondling him, he clings to one's neck and then falls asleep. Pretty white chicks who are still not fully fledged and look as if their clothes are too short for them, cheeping loudly, they follow one on their long legs or walk close to the mother hen." So this is kind of the medieval equivalent of, I shouldn't say medieval, I should say the 11th century Japanese equivalent of like cute animal memes on Facebook. This is a list of things that Sei just finds really stinking cute. And as we read this list, we gain a very clear picture of what she's trying to tell us because she uses very specific details, very specific imagery. This sense of, I love in this last one when she talks about baby chicks, when they're running around and they're so fluffy that they look like their legs are really long. And so it gives this sort of comical effect that makes them look like their clothes are too short, like they're wearing little shorts. And that's extremely cute. Or, what it's like when you hold a baby and a baby falls asleep in your arms, nestled against your neck, and it's just so stinking cute. So this is just a list of things that Sei thinks are precious. And she wants to, in this piece, in this list, she wants not just to write down that she thinks they're cute, she wants to draw out enough specific details and imagery so that her audience will read this list and go, "Aww, yeah, that's so precious." which admittedly is exactly what I'm doing right now. So I'd say this is pretty successful. Let's look at another example. This is from the list Depressing Things. Now, Depressing Things is much longer than Adorable Things, which, I get. So here's an excerpt from it. Quote, "It is quite late at night, and a woman has been expecting a visitor. Hearing finally a stealthy tapping, she sends her maid to open the gate and lies waiting excitedly. But the name announced by the maid is that of someone with whom she has absolutely no connection. Of all the depressing things, this is by far the worst. One has sent a friend a verse that turned out fairly well. How depressing when there is no reply poem. Even in the case of love poems, people should at least answer that they were moved at receiving the message or something of the sort. Otherwise, they will cause the keenest disappointment." End quote. So here, Sei is listing off things that she finds depressing, but again, she's doing so in such a way that uses very precise examples and very specific language. And if you notice, the two examples she brings up here are a specific kind of depressing, the sort of depressing that depends on, unmet expectations or that feeling of being left hanging by somebody, which we can totally relate to in the year 2020. We can all relate to that feeling of like, oh, I'm waiting for somebody, I'm waiting for a friend, I'm waiting for somebody, and the next person I see is not that person. And it's frustrating, it's depressing, you feel like you've been left hanging when your friend never shows up, you feel like you've been ghosted. And the same way with this second example, you write to a friend and you're like, hey, I'm really proud of this poem. Give me, what do you think? Could you give me some feedback? Like, hey, look, I'm really proud of this. And then it's not just that the friend isn't enthusiastic, it's that the friend doesn't send a reply at all. It's like being left on read in a text thread. So these are really relatable emotions that Sei is writing about here. This sense of being ghosted, being left on read, being frustrated by your expectations of other people. And so she's using all of this very specific language to help us feel and relate to this same sense of being depressed by, other people failing to meet your expectations in a social sense. So this is just two examples of the kind of language that Sei Shonagon uses in her Pillore Book, and the way that she does a really fantastic job of putting together these emotions, these lists that are not lists so much as poems about the emotions that we all feel. And so for your discussion board this week, you are going to write a Pillore Book style list. A list of things that you find exciting, a list of foods that you love to eat on a cold day, a list of anything that has the same kind of emotional bent to it. And you can find out more about this assignment if you look under the discussion board module. Sorry, not module, the discussion board page on Canvas. So until next week, good luck with your response paper, good luck with your discussion board, and we will meet next week to talk about the Renaissance. Bye-bye.